Total Screen proudly presents the Weekly Set Podcast with Tyson Gifford and William Rohrig. Episode 239, recorded January 20th, 2020. Hello everybody and welcome to the Weekly Set, the official podcast of the Total Screen. I am your host, my name is Tyson, and joining me today as always is my partner in crime here at the Total Screen, William Rohrig.
Hello.
So today we are going to be talking about The Good Place, The Magicians. We're going to talk a little bit about Lost because our rewatch is coming up very soon. So, let's get started right on The Good Place. We're going to be talking about the first two episodes since it's come back from its hiatus. We're going to be talking about episode 10 of season 4, You've Changed, Man, and episode 11 of season 4, Mondays. Am I right? So, yeah. It seems like The Good Place is going a little bit slow the last two episodes. There isn't a terribly, if you really think about it, there have been a few big events and stuff that have happened, but pacing-wise, it's really slowed down. Like, it doesn't seem like there's a fire under anyone's ass anymore.
It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we've only got like 2 more weeks of The Good Place, too. So, like, it ends on the 30th.
Yeah, we got like another like regular night of The Good Place, and then we have like a really long, basically like a full night, full primetime night selection that's like I think an hour and a half or something.
So basically, You Changed, Man takes place after where we left off, where Chidi, with all his memories from all his existences,
like 800 or something timelines.
800 or something timelines, two lives on Earth, just concentrate into one Chidi, makes Chidi like super confident now.
Super Chidi.
He's super Chidi. And he gets to work on solving the problem, finding a system that they can use instead of having the world destroyed, while the judge tries to find the remote hidden in the Janets to destroy the Earth.
She's going through all the different Janets, so all have different insides.
Yes.
Disco Janet.
I love the inside of Bad Janet. Literal dumpster fire.
Yeah, Bad Janet's just like a mess inside. Disco Janet's just like a party inside.
Yes.
Like where she actually, like, the judge loses track of what she's doing because she's just dancing. So that was pretty funny. And even Disco Janet, even when she was marbleized as like a disco ball.
Yes, I thought that was really...
It was a nice touch.
That was a nice touch.
Yeah, but they go through, the judge is going through all the different Janets, marbleizing them. They keep, like, re-encountering the judge and trying to, like, broker some kind of a deal or something, and the judge just is, like, annoyed and going like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
The main problem is just that they can't get on the same page as Sean. So they'll come up with something that's like mutually agreeable to Sean, and then like, Sean's like, no, how about I take everything? And then the people from The Good Place that can also weigh in are like, yeah, that sounds good. We'll just give him whatever he wants.
The people from The Good Place people just agree with anything.
Yeah, they'll just cave to, we'll just cave to whatever demand he has.
So they come to an impasse where The Good Place people will just cave to everything, and Sean will say no to everything.
Yeah.
Out of spite, because Sean tells Michael, he's like, because Michael's like, you're gonna lose, and Sean is like, I don't care if I lose as long as you lose.
So yeah, and then you have where the episode of the title of the episode comes from, which is Jason, after Sean's like backs out of their plan or whatever and doesn't agree to go along with it. Jason's like, you've changed, man. You used to be cool.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Wait a minute. What?
Yeah, what?
Yeah. So there's not too much to talk about. There's lots of little funny moments and stuff. But
the best part is when, after the judge has marbleized all the Janets except for the main Janet, they trap the judge inside of Janet's void to explain their plan, and they materialize Timothy Oliphant. Just
he's just like interrupting and getting in the way most of the time.
Yeah, he's just getting in the way. He's just like he just takes the judge's side.
It's funny because he's just straight up justified Timothy Oliphant.
Yeah, he's justified Timothy Oliphant, like he has a hat and everything. But yeah, he keeps like
he's just sitting on the judge's lap or on the side of her chair.
Yeah, he keeps interrupting and like second guessing like their plan, and then like to the point where Eleanor is like, "Dude, whose side are you on?" He's like, I am impartial. I'm not on anybody's side here." That's that. I'm just asking questions.
It's just funny because, like, at first, like it's like, oh, he's just kind of like eye candy for the judge, a reason to have him there. And then they were going into their plan and he just starts interrupting.
Yeah.
It's being annoying.
Yeah, just being annoying.
I thought that was funny, yeah. But basically, it all comes to the point where Michael is finally able to get through to Sean on the concept that Sean is never so much alive as when he's like fighting Michael, basically.
Yes.
Like he didn't have any joy in anything else he was doing, but he was actually enjoying himself, like plotting against Michael and causing trouble with that. So that's where they end up coming. The thing is that they wouldn't be plotting against each other for millions and billions of years or whatever.
That's where Michael is able to reach Sean, you know? Yeah. That moment with Sean, which is like funny because like he's the last person you'd think like Michael or anybody could get through to.
He likes the game, so like legitimizing the game between them that's what's going to be fun for him. So that's the solution that they end up coming to.
Yeah.
Which is basically Chidi's idea that basically the idea is to get everybody to the good place, but through a long process in which they're tested over and over and over and over again until they get to it.
Until they pass the test.
Yeah. So they're not tested and then they fail. They test it. If they fail, then they restart the test and they just keep doing it over and over until they can pass, and they have vague memories of what happened before, just enough to kind of help them change.
Yeah. And so with Sean on board, everybody agrees to it, and then the judge basically like has to let them implement it.
Yeah. But this is right after the judge actually found the Earth Destroyer thingy, which Jason quickly just starts tossing around.
Oh, yeah.
To everyone's abject horror.
Yeah, like, Eleanor's like, Jason!
He's all, what? Like, fine. What? He just throws it on the desk.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's pretty much the first episode this week. And then the next
episode is they got their plan, and they got everybody on board. Now they're trying to like teach like the bad place demons like to implement the plan.
Chainsaw hands.
No, Chainsaw Bear.
Yeah, Chainsaw Bear. Like
yeah.
Every time they're trying to do something, it's like, oh, and then there's this party environment, and she turns around, Chainsaw Bear.
Well, yeah. But no, because it's like Tahani's supposed to be like demonstrating the test for them. You know, it's supposed to be the test, and so the one demon there, the woman demon, you know, her idea of like the test is like, yeah, it's Tahani's like at this fancy party, you know, in her natural setting. She gets off her hors d'oeuvres and she turns around and it's Chainsaw Bear. And then they're like, stop. And then she's like, what? Chainsaw Bear is a classic. It's like, no, that's not what we mean by the test. And then they do it again.
She keeps finding different ways to insert Chainsaw Bear.
Yeah,
she's just not getting it.
I love when they're selling the idea to the demons or whatever. They came up with like a commercial with like Janet
and
Jason,
Michael like singing.
And Michael, Janet, Jason, and Michael. You know, like they're like, when you hear this, ding, 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 that's it. You're in the good place. If you hear this, well, you know. And then like the one diva is like, oh, thank God that's over. And then it's not over. It continues. And it's just like Janet's like, it's simply the test.
Janet and Michael singing, yeah.
Better than all the tests.
It's like the worst kind of like office like training video.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Like the cheesiest, stupid.
Cheesiest, like, yeah, work.
Everyone who's ever had to sit through, like, training videos at work, you know?
Yeah, it's exactly like that. Oh my god. And at the beginning when like the demons are piling in for like the meeting, like Michael set up, and the one demon goes, "Oh, I hope it's not more sexual harassment training. It's like, I hope it's not more sexual harassment training. I'm already very good at it."
Yeah. The big kind of crux of this episode, there's no more like ticking clock, which kind of like, neuters everything a little bit. But without any ticking clock, the big thing is we get the return of Vicky.
Yeah, we get the return of Vicky.
Michael is kind of failing at getting the bad place people to understand what needs to be done.
Right, they're just not getting it.
But Vicky comes in and immediately it does like a great job of showing exactly what needs to be done.
Vicky comes in and immediately understands it.
Yeah. She does a great job of it, and then that makes Michael like super jealous.
Yeah. Jealous, it doesn't make Michael jealous per se, it induces anxiety in Michael, because Michael sees that, and then he starts imagining a world where he's useless.
Yeah.
And
so he's like, he's like, oh, this is, average work, C+ at best. Yeah, you for reasons that only I can understand.
Yeah, for reasons only I can understand. C+, totally average. And then, he explains, Michael explains to Tahani that this whole time he was like Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill, up the mountain. And he's like, and now, like, there's no rock. And he says, if there's no rock, then what is he?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he was so anxious about that.
Yeah. He eventually ends up having a conversation with Vicky and convinces her to kind of take his role and make it her own. And she's going to have that role. And they figure out that the only way to make the demons respect it and follow with it is if she like steals the role from him rather than him handing it over to her.
Right.
Because everybody hates him. So all the demons hate him. So it's like the only way that they'll respect her and they'll follow what she wants to do.
Yeah,
and then that's the goal.
And that's the goal. The B plot was the plot with Chidi worrying that he's not good enough for Eleanor.
Well, it started with Eleanor being worried about Chidi reading her book.
Yes.
Or her file. Because if he reads her file, then he'll know, like, everything that she's done that's so bad, and that'll make her, make him hate her, and he won't like her anymore. And that's resolved very quickly, but then that leads into the other problem, which is...
the Chidi reading her file, and Chidi's like, oh, you've done so much, you've lived a full life, and I've done, like, nothing with... My life was so boring. I've done nothing with my life compared to you. How could you be with somebody, like, as boring as me?
For eternity,
For eternity, yeah.
So it becomes, that becomes kind of like the new crux, and ironically enough, Jason is the one that solves it.
Yes.
When Chidi's talking about it to him, Jason ends up taking on the idea that, oh, so you're saying that I'm not good enough for Janet then?
Yes.
Like, ipso facto, like I'm not good enough for Janet, so that's, if what you're saying is the case for you, then that's the case for me and Janet. And he gets all depressed and walks away, and Chidi has to, like, come to him and figure out, like, no, you are good enough, everything works out like this, and then Jason goes, aha, gotcha!
Yeah. That was great. And it's just like the look of confusion on G's face, and G's just like, yeah, I gotta give that to you. I like that. I like that when Jason quoted Shakespeare or something, and and Chidi's just like, wait, you read Shakespeare? And Jason says, I read books sometimes.
What, you do?
Yeah.
That's like the audience's reaction. You do?
You do? Yeah, I know, right? There's layers to this. There's things we still don't know about these characters.
And so the episode basically just ends with where it leaves off for next week is that now the testing ground is all going into action, and because they've basically saved Earth and saved mankind, they've been granted access to the good place now.
Yeah, which Michael
and not
says
only
is
them,
actually
but Janet and
which Michael says is actually the good place this time. It's not a trick again.
But it's Janet and Michael are joining them. And they're getting into the golden hot air balloon and heading off to the good place, and that's where the episode ends. So next week, we'll find out what's going on in the good place, which obviously can't just be perfect. There has to be some kind of a problem.
Yeah, there has to be something. Otherwise, what are we doing? So I'm guessing they get to the good place, the actual good place, and it's not what anybody expects.
Yeah.
And
it's just ineptly run by they have to address how inept the good place people are.
Yes. How they just say yes to everything.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it, like anybody could just like walk all over them.
Yeah.
Who's to say they don't get to a good place and find out that Sean's been running it? You know?
Yeah.
That would be.
We have no idea. So something's gonna end up happening. Surely something's gonna end up happening with the good place, and that'll be kind of like the last twist that they have to resolve.
Yes.
Before the final twist of the series, which of course is that all of them, including the demons, are in the bad place, and it's Jason's the devil.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the good place. We got 2 more weeks to talk about that, so look forward to that. We got another episode next week, and then the week after that, there's like a big finale event. I think it's a double episode plus like an after show special, I think. So like 90 minutes or something. So check that out. But next up, we have The Magicians, which just returned for season 5, episode 1, Do Something Crazy, which she does. I'll just say before we even get into the plot. But yeah, so a lot to kind of catch up on. So basically season 4 ended, magic was kind of reopened to everybody. Quentin kind of, ended up taking out that head librarian guy and himself.
Yeah. So
and restored magic powered everybody.
Yeah. He restored magic, took out the head library, so the library is no longer a threat. There is now a surplus of magic, and it seems like, and all the major plot lines are resolved. This is actually the first time we're going into a new season where there wasn't like a major, like this huge cliffhanger. The only thing that they showed at the very end of the last episode is that Elliot and Margot were flung 300 years into the future when they returned to Fillory, and they're in a future version of Fillory being ruled by a despot.
Yeah, which ended up kind of not being quite as dark and crazy as it seemed like it was going to be.
No.
It still looks like it's still, weird fun times Fillory.
It is. It appears like anybody who's from Earth, like they're going after them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's dangerous for the people of Earth, but in general, Fillory still has that same kind of like, it's dangerous, but it's just kooky and weird kind of way that Fillory's always been.
Right.
It's still the way. It's not like all of a sudden all the characters that you see are all depressed.
But what happens in Fillory is there is this festival, I guess, to celebrate the anniversary of the Unshackling, which is apparently when the Dark Wizard, literally the Dark Wizard, that's what he's called.
The Dark King, I think.
He's the Dark King. He was the Dark Wizard before he was the Dark King, right? I'm pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, yes. Before the Dark Wizard overthrew Finn and Josh and had them executed, apparently.
Yeah.
And Elliot and Margot sneak into the castle to watch this play and get all this exposition out of the way. Basically, it's just exposition.
It's funny though, like, it's kind of reminiscent of like Arya, but like in a funnier way, of like when Arya watched the play about all the events of King's Landing. Like, being beheaded and stuff. We had that whole like play that she watched. It's kind of like that. Like they're sitting there watching this play version of themselves house. Like, Elliot is like a total lush,
Yeah.
And, Margot just kind of being a bitch. And like, they have that whole kind of like thing. And then them, being taken out of control by Josh and Fen, who just are kind of irresponsible. Josh just wants to cook all the time. And
he's like, and it's funny because like the Josh in the play has a mustache and Elliot's just like, Josh had a mustache?
Like Josh went through a mustache phase?
Yeah, Josh went through a mustache phase.
And then they find out that, not only were they, taken out of power, but that they were executed, that, Fen was, I think, hung, and then Josh was beheaded.
Yeah.
And Margot can't deal with this.
Yeah, Margot can't deal with this.
She had kind of developed a relationship with Josh last season. So now she's like really upset about that. And so she takes off, and Elliot, with him, it's a little bit different. Like he should be upset more than he is, but he's kind of drowning his sorrows.
He is.
That's kind of like the point of what he's doing right now is everything's about him being disconnected because he's drowning his sorrows. He doesn't want to confront losing, Quentin, and he says he doesn't remember much of what happened when he was taken over by that entity. Can't remember what it was called, but
we know that's largely a lie.
Yeah, that's how that always is going to develop in the storyline. Is like the person's going to say, "Oh, I don't remember any of it," and then you're going to eventually have that moment where they, reveal like how much they actually do. Well,
there's also the fact that that he was in there. Like Penny was able to visit him in there and talk to him, and he was very much aware.
Yeah.
That he was taken over, while he was in there.
Yeah, so we're still going to have that moment, I'm sure, coming up later in the season where that kind of all comes out. But for now, the main problem with Elliot is that he's just, he's not letting himself grieve. He's just kind of, drowning his sorrows.
He's bottling it up. And it's not.
Yeah.
And that leads to a fight with him and Margot because, that's getting a little ahead because first, before we have that going on, they decide that the best thing they could do is to have the dwarf turn back the wheels of time, so to speak. Although that's impossible.
Yeah. That's what they want to have, and they end up taking like a slide down to the center of Fillory, which is really funny. And then, they end up talking to the dwarf, who's just like a regular sized person. And,
he's like, what do you think dwarf means? And he's like, well, on Earth, dwarf means small.
He's like, really? Really surprised him.
Yeah.
But yeah, they end up finding out that they can't go back through those means. So they have to find something else. But it was funny when they decided that they were going to go back because Margot said, we're going to have to endgame this bitch.
Oh, yeah.
And
Elliot's like, when did you have time Elliot's to see game?
Yeah. Which is funny because chronologically, if you think of like when the show aired, like when the last season aired, like literally there was no point in which you could have seen Endgame.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just kind of a meta joke for the way, they wanted to put in a pop culture reference that the character couldn't possibly have observed.
Right, exactly.
She's like, never mind that. Margot's still doing her like, her little feminist, buck up, like things, like grow a clit.
Yeah.
I think it was last year, it was ovary up, wasn't it, or something?
Yeah. Like, grow a clit, and Elliot's like, I would if I could, bitch.
That's pretty much Elliot and Margot's story. It was probably my favorite of them, just because I love Elliot and Margot. But
yeah, it ends when Elliot, because you were saying, because Elliot's bottling up his feelings, he gets into a fight with Margot. Margot gets upset with him, and they get into a fight. Margot runs off. Elliot's drowning his sorrows, and Margot gets captured by the Dark King's men and thrown into a cell. Apparently, same cell they were holding Josh because she sees like a spirit, like recording, I guess, if you could say. It's not like, it's not in a spirit in the sense that it was
like an echo.
Yeah, it was like an echo, not something that she could interact with or was interacting with her. It was just
it's just like an echo of him being held in that cell.
Yeah.
And, so she gets to see him and it's kind of doubling her commitment to wanting to save him, but like, now she's imprisoned. But that's Elliot and Margot's story. Julia's kind of like the real star of this episode, not for the name of the episode, that's somebody else, but for the episode itself, which is she and Penny have gone on a date now, Penny 23.
Yes.
And they're actually like kind of dating now, and he takes her to watch like a light show.
By the way, there's so much magic now that there are magic surges.
Yeah.
Which are dangerous.
So he takes her to see a light show that his friend is doing, like using with like falling stars or something, and he's like controlling them to make like a light show. But in the middle of the show, there's a magic surge, and it causes it to become dangerous. So Penny like warps them away really quick.
And Penny gets an offer from Dean Fogg, not really an offer, he's actually forced, to become a professor for a wayward group of new travelers.
Yeah, because of the magic surges, there's a lot more people are waking up to magical abilities, and with, just in sheer numbers of people waking up to magic, some of those people are going to be travelers. And so there's quite a few travelers.
Actually,
and if you remember, they haven't addressed it.
Breakbills is now overcrowded, much to Dean Fogg's dismay. He is not happy about. He's like Dean Fogg is like, we got so many students that we might as well be a goddamn state college.
But yeah, with the travelers, the issue is like it's been so long since the issue's been like at hand. But if you remember in the first season of The Magicians, being a traveler was incredibly dangerous for Penny.
Yes.
Like he was teleporting sometimes subconsciously without wanting to. He could end up in a dangerous position because of it. He also was dealing with all the voices in his head that he ended up getting wards to protect against. So he wasn't hearing people's thoughts. That's something that I almost forgot about his character, that he could do that.
Yes.
Because he had warded that away basically because it was too distracting.
Yeah, because it was too distracting.
So of course now he comes into this class of travelers and basically tells them like, get wards, block off your abilities, don't bother with them, go home.
Yeah, because you will die, and it sucks.
And Dean Fogg is like, look at the contract you signed, you're stuck coming in, it's not just a one-time appearance. You have to actually teach them. And he's like, God damn it.
Yeah,
So he goes back again, and this time he takes them to a different planet that he had traveled to. And just to kind of show them the kind of the cool side of traveling. And as he's there with the students, like one of the students talks to him about this kind of signal she's hearing that's kind of bothering her. And he can't hear it because he's all warded up. But he lowers his wards and immediately like loses control. Like he ends up traveling without wanting to, and he travels back, and he kind of like he's barely manages to get his wards back up, but it's like a real problem basically. So this is like the new big threat, I guess you could say, is something about this signal. So that's kind of like Penny's story outside of his connection with Julia's story. Julia, on the other hand, after, having that whole experience with the surges and everything, she's just in a position with Quentin dead and him being, her longtime friend, the childhood friends, they grew up together. She doesn't know how to like make it right because she has magic again because of all the pain of Quentin's death. And so she sees it as like, I have magic again because Q died. And so therefore I have to do something with my magic that's big enough to merit Q dying. That's kind of like how she's internalized that. So she needs something to do. She needs to like be proactive and do something. And just as she's struggling with this and trying to figure out what to do, she gets a visit from Sir Effingham, which we saw this clip before. This is like the first thing that was released for the season.
But this is the major thrust for where Julia's story is going, though. We did see this was a preview clip that we viewed
last year, like a while ago.
Yeah. This was a preview clip. Sir Effingham.
I think it might have been like New York Comic-Con when it came out or something.
Yeah, I think it was near Comic-Con. Yeah.
So it's quite a while ago.
And it was like
a literal sexist pig.
Yeah, a literal chauvinist pig. It was like he's a pig who dresses and talks and acts like he walked straight out of the 1700s.
He's like a Victorian pig man.
Yeah, Victorian from Fillory. And he says, he has a quest. There's apocalyptic events happening in Fillory, and he needs a hero, and he's looking for Quentin Coldwater, and he finds Julia instead, and he tells her he's looking for Quentin, and she's just like, well, he's dead. And then, he's like, all is lost. Also, and Julia's like, well, I got magic, I could help out, and he's just like, no. I'm afraid you wouldn't be of any help. This requires a certain kind of hero.
It's all, how can I say, one with a pork loin.
Yeah.
So she's like, okay, what the fuck?
She's like, okay, what the fuck? And then as he's like, I'll take my leave. Don't worry. We will find a hero, and when we find him, and it will be him.
I love it right at the end, after he finishes up and he's leaving, he's like, comes back and he's all, by the way, your problem might be having to do with hysteria, and I hear that women can relieve hysteria through pelvic massages. Which is like an actual thing that they used to think in like olden days.
Yeah, in olden days.
That, women that were like horny were like crazy.
But this sets things into motion for Julia, because later on in the episode when Julia is talking to Penny, Julia recounts this, and she's just like, you know what, screw that pig. I'm going to go on that quest. I'm going to take on that quest myself. And I don't need that pig's, approval. It was like, and so this is what she's gonna do now for this. This is her story for the season.
So she's kind of taking the Quentin role of getting the quest and having to fulfill it. Yeah. Then we have Katie and Pete, her like new assistant guy or whatever, and they're trying to deal with the Reed's mark, which is that tattoo that like the magical tattoo that they were giving to the hedge witches because the hedge witches were blowing up last season, because it was the librarians created this situation where they basically infected hedge witches with like a parasite that would basically make them explode if they used magic.
Yes, yeah. Very
insidious. And then they gave them a tattoo that made it so they couldn't use magic even accidentally, in order to like make them voluntarily submit to getting their magic turned off. And this happened, and they were supposed to get the library was supposed to remove all the tattoos from these people that they did this bullshit to. And they didn't, because the library's got its own problems right now, but they didn't do anything to help. So now the hedge witches are just basically screwed, and they desperately want to use magic again. And so they're resorting to all sorts of bad measures, like blowing off their own arms and stuff. One hedge witch shows up to Katie, literally holding his arm.
Yeah. and then Pete asks him, why don't you go to a hospital? And he's like, I don't have health insurance.
Pretty much. So yeah, again, the show takes place in America. Filmed in Canada, takes place in America.
Yeah, it's filmed in Canada, but it takes place in America. So yeah, if it was Canada, he would have health insurance.
Yeah, so so Katie ends up successfully reattaching his arm, but now she and Pete want to basically get down to what's, the real problem, which is getting rid of this fucking mark from all these people that are, had their magic stolen. So, that's what they're doing. They end up and they visit, Gavin, the library's traveler, and he kind of sets them on their path for that. And we don't really get much beyond that on them.
Yeah, that's basically it.
Lastly, we have Alice's story.
Yes.
So Alice, outside of Julia, who's kind of struggling in her own way, as we'd already mentioned, Alice is like just in full-on funk depression. Probably hasn't showered in months. She's just like wearing Quentin's clothes. She's smoking because Quentin used to smoke occasionally. She's doing all these things just to kind of like be closer to Quentin, and she's not adjusting well at all to anything. After getting visited by Julia, who Julia wants to do like a seance, and Alice says that she won't do it, so then Julia kind of gives up on that and goes on the rest of her path that we already talked about with her. But Julia, we kind of pick up with Julia, and she's with her mom, and she's just depressed all the time, and her mom's trying to get her.
You mean Alice?
Her mom, Alice, yeah.
Okay, I was like super confused for a second. I was like,
well, because Alice was visited by Julia earlier.
Yeah, but you said we pick up with Julia, and
okay.
She's with her mom, and I'm like, wait, Julia.
Alice is with her mom, and Alice's mom gives her the advice that you can do something crazy. If you have to do something crazy to get through the grief, then do something crazy.
Right.
Of course, as you know, I think it was also last season that Alice's dad died. Was it last season or the season before?
No, it was the season before last season.
Season 3 then?
Yeah,
it was
pretty
because
sure.
because of Nephilim, because of something Nephilim Alice did.
Yes.
Creature was after her and ended up, taking out her father before they got rid of it.
Right.
And so her mom and her have had this kind of bad relationship, and now she's grieving, and her mom had gone through this grief process too, so they're both.
Also Quentin's dead now, so she's grieving that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, now they have this kind of similar thing. Now they both lost their mate.
Yes.
Essentially. So, that's why Alice's mom tells her, if you have to do something crazy to get through it, do something crazy. That's about the worst advice you could give to somebody like Alice. Cause she does. She decides to do something crazy. And so she goes to the library because the library wants her help with, decoding some books that are like, blocked off basically. And so she does that. She kind of does it, but she says, oh, it's going to take some time, gets the person to leave the room. And then she quickly does it, uses the index that's what was blocked off to find a book that she's looking for. And now she's basically trying to build a Quentin golem.
Yes.
Which is just not going to go well.
No, it's not going to go well at all. It's going to be a freaking disaster.
Yeah, because Alice did something crazy.
Yes.
That's the last person you want to tell to do something crazy is Alice. Because she's done something crazy quite a few times, and it always blows up in her face. It always
blows up, exactly.
Yeah, pretty tragically. So, Magicians is back. We'll be talking about it week to week. I think it's a 13-episode season. So we'll go through, for the next 13 weeks or so talking about it. But that's it for The Magicians. Lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about our Lost rewatch. I just want to kind of get anybody up to date. If anybody wants to join us doing the Lost rewatch, here's the details you need to know. We're going to be starting on Friday, January 24th. That's this coming up Friday. We're going to be watching one episode a day as they're divided by Hulu. So like sometimes if you look up an episode, it'll say the pilot is 2 hours and that's one episode, and then the next episode is episode 2. Hulu is divides up all of those, two-parters into like individual episodes. So that's the rules we're following. We're following Hulu rules. So pilot part 1 on January 24th, pilot part 2 on January 25th. One episode a day. The idea is that if you do that, if you follow one episode a day, you're going to get all the way through the series on Saturday, May 23rd, the 10-year anniversary of when the show ended. So that's what we're building up to. It's also that we end on May 23rd. We're doing one episode a day. If you can't do one episode a day, that's fine. If you've already watched Lost, you don't even really have to do a rewatch. I mean, it's cool to do it, but you don't have to. But yeah, we're going to podcast after each season finale. So like, let's say, right now we're recording on Mondays. So let's say that, a season finale airs on like a Wednesday. Well, that next Monday's podcast will be talking about that Lost season that just came to an end. And then we'll continue to watch, but, as we're, before we even get to that discussion so that we're on track for the next one. But That's about the best way I can explain it. One episode a day, and then we'll podcast, the next podcast after a season ends. We'll podcast about that season, until we're through with the whole thing. As I mentioned, it's available to stream on Hulu. It was an ABC series. Disney owns it. So don't worry about it, leaving Hulu and going, dropping onto some other streaming service. It got put on Hulu in the first place, I believe, because Disney was pulling back their content. And taking more ownership of it. They didn't want it on Netflix. They wanted it on their own streaming service, which at the time was Hulu. Now they have Disney Plus and Hulu, but I imagine Lost is not going to go on Disney Plus. It'll stick on Hulu.
Right.
So that's the main details for the Lost rewatch. Watch along with us, and you can, if you want to send a comment or, a question that you want us to kind of address on the podcast for the season. If you're watching along with us, then you can do that by contacting us on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. Will is at Voxel Hero, so you can contact either of us. And, if you send us a cool question, then we'll put it on our discussion of that season and talk about it. But yeah, so please join us. It'll be really fun to kind of rewatch with more people. It's always, I think, rewatches when you do it with more than just yourself are always fun because you're watching along with other people even though you're not in the same setting.
Right.
It's kind of like you're rediscovering it at the same time. So yeah, that's it. Lost rewatch, January 24th, one episode a day, episodes on Hulu. Join us. Here's what's coming up on the week ahead, the next 2 weeks ahead, I guess. As we're recording this on Monday, January 20th, 2020, All American is back on the CW, Black Lightning's back on the CW, Prodigal Son back on Fox, Carter on WGN, Family Reunion on Netflix. Tuesday, January 1st, Bless This Mess on ABC, The Connors on ABC, Legends of Tomorrow on the CW, Project Blue Book on History. Wednesday, January 22nd, Riverdale on the CW, and Awkwafina is Nora from Queens on Comedy Central. Awkwafina has been blowing up big, so I'm actually kind of excited about that show.
Yeah.
Thursday, January 23rd, Grey's Anatomy, A Million Little Things, and Station 19 on ABC. Outmatched on Fox, The Bull Type on Freeform, The Dead Leads on Shudder, The Red Shadows on Sundance Now, Star Trek Picard on CBS All Access, and The Ghost Bride and October Faction both on Netflix. Of those, I think October Faction is the one that we've both expressed interest in. Star Trek Picard's another one, but neither of us have CBS All Access, so don't expect us to be talking about that.
Right.
Friday, January 24th, Shrill is back on Hulu, The Ranch on Netflix, and Chilling Adventures of Sabrina on Netflix. On Sunday, January 26th, Our Cartoon President on Showtime. On Tuesday, January 28th, Miracle Workers Dark Ages on TBS. So the first season of Miracle Workers was basically about like angels in heaven trying to stop God from destroying Earth.
Yeah.
And now they're making it like an anthology series. So like this new season is the same cast, but a completely different story that just kind of takes place on Earth in the Dark Ages.
Right.
So if you didn't watch the first season, it doesn't matter. It's just the same cast doing a completely different story. It's a pretty funny show. So that's on TBS. It's got Daniel Radcliffe and Steve Buscemi and some other kind of big names in it. Wednesday, January 29th, 2020, Omniscient comes to Netflix. Thursday, January 30th, The Stranger, the miniseries on Netflix. And on Friday, January 31st, BoJack Horseman, Ragnarok, Diablero, and Luna Nera all on Netflix. So that's it. That's what's coming up in the week ahead. Next week, more The Good Place, more The Magicians. As I mentioned before, you can contact me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can contact Will. He is at Voxel Hero. Send us your Lost questions and comments if you watch along with us or about anything else we're talking about, and we can bring that up. You can check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel as well as our site, thetotalscreen.com. You can subscribe to the podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Cast, and the entire backlog of our podcast is available on our YouTube channel. Thank you all for listening. Good night.
Good night.
If you would like to reach out to us and make a comment, send an email to contact@thetotalscreen.com. Stay tuned to The Total Screen for the very best